So let's take a close look at the milestones and its ideas. The key principle of the milestones and to understanding Qutb is the division of the world between Jahiliyyah and Islam. The Jahili period is seen as the period classically before the time of the Prophet Muhammad, when there was great disorder and conflict. Disorder and conflict that was healed by the rise of the Prophet Muhammad, his acceptance of the revelations from God, and the formation of the Islamic religion and the development of their followers, the Muslim people. And Qutb looks at his times when he was writing, the 1950s, and he analogizes those times for the Muslim people as the same as before Islam was created. He says it is a period of Jahiliyyah. In the Milestones, he argues that the whole world is steeped in Jahiliyyah. It's based on rebellion against God's sovereignty on earth. So he believes that the period that they're living in is that there are other sovereigns, that people are not following God's will. He says our whole environment, people's beliefs and ideas, their habits and art, rules and laws, is Jahiliyyah, even to the extent we consider it to be Islamic culture, Islamic sources, Islamic philosophy, and Islamic thought are also constructs of Jahiliyyah. So remember back to the last lecture, Qutb is rejecting all those scientific achievements of the Islamic Golden Age in the centuries after when the Prophet Muhammad had died long ago. And he was saying that they were tainted in many ways because they were living not under a pure Islamic law. And practices, there was an intermingling of the Muslim people with the Christian world. There was ideas and habits that were not strictly in accordance, in his view, with the Word of God. So he considers all those achievements, the science, the culture, the art, to be Jahiliyyah. For Qutb, the key element of Jahiliyyah is the notion of man-made law, and he says that man-made law is Jahili. He says Jahiliyyah takes the form of claiming that the right to create values, to legislate rules of collective behavior, and to choose any way of life rests with men. So he's rejecting a democracy and other forms of government other than a theocracy, really. He's saying that the right to develop laws has to be done in accordance with God's will. And when people are involved, forming in a democracy or an other form of governance, when people are involved in legislating the rules by which people shall live, it is disorder, it is chaos, it is jahili, that only adherence to God's law, to pure Islam, can heal. So Qutb strives very much, and he wants this return to the time of the first generation. He says the first generation, the followers of the Prophet Muhammad, he says at one time this message of Islam created this generation, the generation of the companions of the Prophet, who were without history, comparison in the history of Islam, indeed the history of all mankind. Never again did a great number of such people exist in any one region, and as was the case during the first period of Islam. Why does he hold such veneration for this period? He says there was during this time only one source of guidance. They had only the Quran. Again, the Muslim civilizations did not extend all the way to Indonesia and into Europe and across the African continent and through Pakistan and India. There weren't all these other influences, all these other traditions of governance, the tribes, art, history. He believed there was only the one source of guidance of the Holy Quran. And he says the Quran instructed all aspects of their life, which he believes the Quran is all-encompassing. Again, not looking towards other kinds of influences in individuals' life, not looking to other forms of guidance like a government or a group or a trade union or anything like that, any secular influences like that. He said the Quran instructed all aspects. He saw Islam as being all-encompassing. And he said that the first generation were the greatest generation because they were the ones that denounced the disorder and the Jahili environment that surrounded them. And so they could be joined completely to Islam. So Qutb argues that there's a need for a Muslim revival, an Islamic revival, uh, and he believes that to do that you have to return to the pure practices of the time of the first generation. He argues in the Milestones, if Islam is again to play the role of the leader of mankind, then it's necessary that the Muslim community be restored to its original form, and he means the original form in following the practices of the first generation. It's necessary to revive that Muslim community which is buried under the debris of the man-made traditions of several generations. Again, he's talking about all the history after the 7th century when all these tainted influences, in his view, have corrupted and made the practice of Islam and the influences that govern Muslim people impure. The desired end state would be to return again to that pure source, the source which is free from any mixing or pollution. Our primary purpose, he argues, is to know what way of life is demanded by us by the Quran and the kind of legal and constitutional system it asks us to establish in the world. So the Milestones is not principally a religious document. In many ways, it's a political one. And he makes it very clear is that we have that the source of this political statement, he believes, is the Quran, and he believes that the Quran tells Muslim people the kind of legal and constitutional system that must be established around the entire world. Now, in the Milestones, he says that there's a process of revival, and in order to bring this about, we need to initiate the movement of Islamic revival in some Muslim countries. So, and the process of revival, the foremost objective is to change the practices of this society. His aim is to change the system which is fundamentally at variance with Islam and which, with the help of force and oppression, is keeping us from living the sort of life which is demanded by our Creator. So not only does he reject all of the influences that are governing Muslims, and he's looking, of course, at the Nasser regime and saying that the secularism and the oppression, the torture he was facing, the use of state power against them, that's what he's referring to, the help of force and oppression. He says that those forces, those secular rulers, foisted upon them by the colonial powers of the West, were keeping them from living a pure life, the one demanded by God in his view, and dictated by the principles laid out in the Quran. So he's calling for a revival, a casting off of the current and a replacement with a new type of society.